Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished story coach from Pune, India, Mr. Ravishankar Iyer. Ravi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh, for having me.
Thank you. Ravi is a story coach and a founder, and he helps people tell better stories of their work. So, Ravi, while we will talk storytelling, I have a few questions for you personally. What was the turning point when you realized storytelling was your true calling?
Yeah, it's a great question, right, Ashutosh? It's been, I guess, many instances which eventually added up to it becoming. But if I go back, maybe I can, when I connect the dots, maybe there were three, 4 points that played a key role. I think one crucial point was reading when I was young, right? And from a very young age, my dad introduced me to books, and I was an inveterate reader, a lot of fiction when I was growing up. And so I think that stories kind of become a part of
Yeah.
you when you read so much, right? So that was one thing.
Hmm.
And there was a brief dalliance that I had with doing something in the world of writing, journalism in my college days. But common sense prevailed that no, let's do a safe thing. And
Correct.
I became a CA, chartered accountant, and so I keep telling my participants in my workshops that you have any questions about mutual funds, tax saving instruments, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrency, real estate, gold, anything at all, please don't ask me because I've forgotten those a long time back. Qualified in
Yeah.
2001.
Yeah.
Worked for a year and a half with L&T, then did my MBA from IMA, and then 7 years in consulting. So, but this grounding, Ashutosh, was very useful. I'm very grateful to this period because it's grounding in finance and
Hmm.
business numbers, especially the consulting stint is very useful for me even today, right?
Hmm.
So, because in my consulting stint, we used to, teach, we used to, sorry, connect with companies and, clients, and they would say, hey, should we invest in this company? Should we acquire this? What valuation? And the temptation always, Ashutosh, was that let's just share everything that we found. We found this data on the market, that data on competition, this pricing data, this is the growth.
Hmm.
And the audience would be overwhelmed. And
Hmm.
I still remember this one conversation, among the turning points, I think this was a crucial one. There's a client of ours called Abhishek Sharman, private equity. And so I once met him casually, outside of the work, and I asked him, hey, Ashutosh, any Abhishek, any feedback for my work? And he said, Ravi, you guys are very good. You give a lot of information. Your depth is unparalleled, but you need to know the story. You need to tell the story from the data.
Hmm.
Now, it's a very sanguine statement. There's no, it's a very normal statement. And maybe 5 years back, I would not have understood the import of that statement.
Hmm.
Maybe at that time, I was ready to hear that statement, and it just spoke to me. And I realized that in storytelling, less is more, right? You should have a lot of depth, should have a lot of detail, but no, do not overwhelm the audience with a lot. So I think that was a crucial turning point. And my work, my presentation, my communication changed pretty much from that day, almost like a
Hmm.
switch. That was one. And I think the third big turning point was post consulting 2011. I did a couple of stints, one with a non-profit in the skill development space, learned a bunch of things, including how terrible I am at operations. And there was a passion project. We wanted to do work in the history storytelling space. So I'm a big
Hmm.
fan of history. And so our idea was, can we tell the stories of India's monuments in a more memorable way, in a more engaging way? So we built a tool called Captivator along with a couple of batchmates of mine. We told stories of monuments like Qutub Minar, Taj Mahal, etc. And I researched and wrote the stories for that, right?
Hmm.
So, but that somehow was not working. It
Hmm.
didn't pick up.
Hmm.
Now, the turning point happened when this was not Captivate was not working, and to do some side income, I did a couple of training workshops on consulting skills and presentation skills, etc. It was then that I realized, hey, the storytelling skills I was using to build my history, stories is exactly the same that I'm teaching analysts and finance people and technology people how to tell better stories at work. And that was a big aha moment for me that, it's not history which is a passion area for me, it's storytelling.
Hmm.
And I don't mind, whether you tell me a great science story like a Bill Bryson, great story on sport like Harsha Bogle, a great political analysis by Shekhar Gupta. For me, all of these guys are good storytellers, right? So I started to see, hey, this is what I want to, learn more about, dive deeper into, and then after understanding these techniques, try and teach them to various audiences, right? So
Hmm.
I guess, yeah, that's been my
What an
long
amazing
answer to that.
journey.
Yeah, yeah.
What an
Happy.
amazing journey. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you. Thanks.
Tell me a little bit more about why you formed Story Rules in 2016, and what is the story behind using the word rules?
Yeah, I was just so there was no you can't even I can't even say I formed so it's just me. There is no
Mhm.
other, I don't have employees. It's just a brand. I realized I needed to have a brand for, there are people who teach on their own name. I'm somehow uncomfortable with that. I don't like to have a website saying ravishankariyer.com.
Mhm.
So I wanted a brand for whatever. It's not that I have a plan to have 10 employees or whatever. Um and yeah, so it's just a, this word just came as an inspiration, just a word, word
Mhm.
play on, rules, both
Okay.
the two meanings which are there. So
Mhm.
nothing
Okay.
beyond that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's talk storytelling now, Ravi. Do you prefer we call you Ravi or Ravi Shankar?
Ravi is better. Ravi
Ravi.
is better.
Okay. Okay. I should have asked you before.
No worries.
So my first question on storytelling is that, you know, in the last 5 or 6 years, the term storytelling seems to have, caught on,
Yeah.
very similar to personal branding.
Mm.
Why, in your opinion, is storytelling such a crucial skill for professionals, especially leaders?
And especially in the last 4 5 years, right? You're
Correct.
right. And it's been becoming a bit of a buzzword, and that's sometimes not a good thing
Yeah.
because some people tend to become skeptical when they hear it. Storytelling, it's okay. But I
Mm.
think there is a lot of genuine value that it can bring to
Yeah.
leaders, right?
Mm.
So even I reflect on that, what is changing?
Mm.
Change is an important element, right? So I think the two, three things that are changing, Ashutosh, which is I think driving the need for becoming a better storyteller. Maybe it was okay maybe in the 1990s, 2000s, when you were not necessarily a good storyteller. But now you have to do that. You have to learn that to stand out. Why? The two, three things are, I think, one, the data explosion, right? We
Mm.
did not have this amount of data 10 years, 15 years,
Correct.
definitely 20 years back, right?
Correct.
So all of us are swimming in like absolute sea of data. So that makes it difficult for people to understand, hey, tell me what's the story. The second challenge that has happened to all of us is that attention spans are definitely not increasing, is only coming down, right? So people are struggling with saying that, hey, if you're not going to engage my attention in the first 30 seconds, 1 minute,
Mm.
I've got enough things on my phone to look at, right? And it could be work, it could be entertainment. So you better get my attention very quickly.
Correct.
Otherwise, I'll get distracted away. That's the other big thing. Attention spans are coming down. And now I think the new trend that is a challenge right now, we all are, swimming in that new trend is AI, right? And
Mm.
AI is great. I think it can be a lovely, powerful tool
Yeah.
for helping you brainstorm, helping you sharpen your thoughts, to edit, and to come up with the right visuals and all. But if you start using AI as a replacement for your thoughts, that's a terrible thing because it'll
Correct.
be generic AI slop. So that's the other thing, that if you want to stand out and bring out your authentic voice in a day and age of exploding data and lowering attention spans,
Mm.
storytelling can be a very powerful tool.
Well said. And can you, for our viewers and listeners, share some key elements of a compelling story in a business context?
Great question. So lots of elements which are there. One, there are two, three ways to look at it, right? So one framework that I try to, observe in my own mind is it has to broadly go through 4 steps, right? A good compelling business story.
Mm.
So for simplicity, I call it the ABCD 4 steps. So what are the 4 steps? Align with your audience. That's the first
Right.
step. A story might be brilliant, very well written, but
Mm.
if you've not taken into account who are you presenting to, where are they coming from, what are their objectives, what are their concerns and fears, then it can fall flat, right? It's like the foundation on which the story house is built. So number one, that's a foundation. Then the B for me is the most important step, and that's the one that I feel is the most neglected in typically in most corporate environments. So I call it build your story narrative,
Mm.
not the slides, not your delivery preparation, not the charts, but narrative.
Mm.
And I remember you had asked me sometime earlier that, why do you call it narrative driven storytelling? It's because of this, because I feel that people directly start to think, oh, I've got data, let me start making slides. No, wait. Think about what you want to say
Mm.
for this audience, for their objective. What are the, 3 key points you want to say?
Yeah.
And then maybe can you condense that into just one key elevator pitch kind of a sentence, right? So when I do my trainings and workshops, I spend 60-70% of the time on this level to have
Mm.
a clear narrative. And there are some details within that which we can get into.
Mm.
Then the C stands for choose the right visuals
Mm.
because we are it's amazing. 50% of our mind, of our brain, is dedicated to visual processing. It's one of the most powerful senses that we have as Homo sapiens, right? So we should make sure that don't drown your audience in text. Yeah, you may have a great narrative, but if you're just going to show it all in text, in a day and age when people are used to great visuals, you will lose their attention again, right? So how do you choose the right visuals? How do you make it compelling? That's the third step. And fourth, and this is especially useful in an age of AI, is your voice, right? So how do you deliver? The D stands for deliver with impact.
Mm.
How do you deliver in a way that your audience is engaged throughout your talk, throughout your
Mm.
presentation? You keep, putting in hooks there to engage their attention. You script it out really well. You practice in the right way. So a bunch of techniques are there around this. So these are the four broad process, like
Very
align with your
nice.
audience, build your story narrative, choose the right charts, and deliver with impact.
Wow. ABCD: align, build, choose, and deliver. Fabulous. Thank you. So let's move on now. You were talking of a narrative-driven storytelling approach. Help me understand, how do you craft such a narrative? And
Yeah.
if you have an example, that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, so narrative is a very wide area, right?
Yeah.
And the first step, or okay, let me kind of step back and say, what are the objectives that a good story or a good narrative should try and achieve from your audience's point of view, right?
Hmm.
And let me take the example of I'm let's say, business leader, and I've got a proposal for a new project that I'm championing, right? And I want that proposal to get accepted by my senior stakeholder audience, right? So I want to tell that story. Now, what are the objectives for my narrative and visuals and delivery? So it's like there are four. The final objective, let me start with the final objective and then we'll work back towards that, right? The final objective is action. Action by your stakeholder saying approved. Go ahead, do it, right? That's
Hmm.
if that happens, my story has done its job.
Hmm.
So how do I get to that action? So there are four steps that need to be done. And for each step, there are techniques of narrative that can be done, right? So what are the four
Hmm.
steps? Step one is basic clarity or understanding. That often a lot of detailed proposals or presentations or reviews get lost at that step only because
Hmm.
the audience, who must be a very senior stakeholder, looks at something which is very technical or too much numbers, too much information, and scratching their head saying, "Bhai, kehna kya chahte ho?" Right? What do you want to say? What is the point of the story? That means you have not achieved that itself, right? So base objective of a narrative is, can you make it simple and clear
Correct.
while not sacrificing depth?
Hmm.
Bunch of techniques around that. Second objective of a narrative is, okay, fine, this is good. I'm understanding what you're saying, but I'm bored. Yeah. This is like, I've seen the same thing, how can you make it engaging,
Hmm.
get my attention, hold my attention, and hopefully make it memorable? Because
Hmm.
often, not every proposal will get accepted, or not every idea will get accepted in that same meeting, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes something needs to fester in their mind, something needs to, marinate in their mind. So can you put in some elements of memorability there? So that, after a week, after 2 weeks, they still remember, yeah, this guy had used this brilliant analogy. I still remember that, right?
Hmm.
Those are some techniques that can be used in your
Yeah.
narrative
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make it engaging.
Hmm.
Third is, sure, I'm engaged and all of that, but why should I care? What's in it for me?
Hmm.
Especially if you're going to tell something which is very, very technical, lots of the level of detail. A senior stakeholder is that, what's the advantage for me? So you have to answer that question and you have to make them care, right? So the
Hmm.
first one was make them understand. Second, make them remember. Third, make them care.
Hmm.
Fourth is a tough one. It's a foundation of pretty much all relationships and storytelling, which is trust.
Hmm.
And this may not be required in many cases, but in a lot of cases, you might find, for some historical reasons, maybe the senior stakeholder doesn't trust you or your team or that idea. I'll give you an example, right? Let's say this is actually in my consulting firm. There was a big push to do a knowledge management system, right?
Hmm.
And it's a lot of effort. As consultants, you just want to do the work and go on to the next project. If somebody tells me, hey, I want you to spend 10 hours, putting it in various folders and all, I'll be like,
Hmm.
I don't have the time. So now somebody wanted to push a knowledge management system, and I was new, so I was okay. But some of my senior, stakeholders, they had a lot of mistrust in that because something like this had been tried in the past a few years back. It took away a lot of time of people,
Yeah.
and it failed miserably,
Yeah.
right? And so they're like, you're going to again take my time, and this is not going to work. So
Hmm.
if you, as a storyteller, you have to realize that, is my audience even, trusting this idea or me as a
Correct.
storyteller? If
Correct.
not, I have to do some things to repair it at that level.
Very
And
well
so
said.
all of these kind of
Very
are there.
well said. Ravi, as you were talking, I was going back to the early 80s when I joined ITC. And the same thing, every time I used to have one particular boss who, every time I went to and I started to explain in detail, he would say, his simple answer was, "Kani mat sunao, get to the point." So I was just thinking how the world has changed in the last 40, 45 years. But moving on, Ravi, you work with so many people. Are storytelling skills innate or can they be significantly developed through training?
I think 100% can be developed, right? Um, Look, I mean, there is an advantage I feel to people who, from a very early age, start maybe reading and writing, right? So writing is a crucial element, I think, in storytelling. If you have a very early advantage, then you may be a little ahead in the game. But that
Hmm,
doesn't mean that others can't learn, right? And now
hmm,
with writing tools like AI available, a lot of the word, finding the right words, putting in the right sentence construction, sharpening it, all of that can be outsourced to AI. So the only core skill that may be slightly innate in storytelling is your thinking ability. I think
hmm,
that may be you've built it from early age. But if you've got that basic thinking ability, then writing is something that can be learned, and there are tools available. Visual thinking also is, I think, a usual is a good element in basic element in storytelling.
hmm,
Also can be learned, and there are tools available. So a lot of both skills that can be learned and tools that are available, which is important, which is there. Maybe the one other thing that I might say that is important is empathy. That's a
hmm.
little tricky. I
Correct.
find that empathy is very, very important, right? Intellectual empathy, when you're
Hmm,
trying to say, if I'm saying something, what is my audience going to think? And also emotional empathy. If I say this, what would they feel?
hmm.
Those two also, I've been just a few days back, I was reading Ashutosh, that even empathy is people are trying to build and teach.
Correct.
But yeah, so storytelling definitely very, very, very learnable skill.
Absolutely. Very well said. Since you just spoke about AI and what AI is doing in terms of being able to tell better stories, my next question is a segue from your comment. How is technology changing storytelling in business, particularly with the availability of generative AI and so many other tools?
Yeah, it's oh my God. Even I'm grappling with it. Even I'm kind of trying to say, how should I change my approach to teaching, to writing? And it's interesting, even a few 6, 7 months back, I wasn't using AI as much because I'm feeling, hey, this is too generic. This I can do better than this, right? But now it's making me question all those assumptions because it's getting better and better.
Hmm.
So if I kind of again take it as the process for writing a presentation or a story or a
Hmm.
town hall speech or whatever, right?
Hmm.
What I would say is retain control of the process.
Hmm.
Use AI a lot, but don't outsource the whole thing to saying, write me a speech for this. I think that's a terrible idea,
Hmm.
right? So what is important, I feel, is start thinking about in your own mind, in your own thing, who's the audience, what is their objective, what is your objective vis-a-vis the talk or the presentation or the story, and maybe write down that as a detailed prompt. And then you can use AI as a sparring partner, right? Initially it might even be great to suggest research ideas, where can I get data
Yeah.
from? Of course, a lot of it will be in your own mind, so you have to
Hmm.
use that. So research is, I think, a good thing. Now, after research, once you're like broadly, you got a good sense of saying, okay, these are all the inputs that I have. I've looked at this data, I've looked at that. Where I would say don't use AI is don't use AI to write your first draft,
Correct.
because that means you're outsourcing the first core thinking part, right? So I remember a line by I forget her name, and anyway, she's written a bunch of books on writing, and so she says that the first draft is a thinking draft, right? So I like that statement. I keep using that a lot. That use your thoughts, however unformed and unclear and haphazard they may
Yeah.
be, but use them and put them out. And so you've got something that is raw, that is you, that is authentic.
Hmm.
Of course, now you can use AI to make that
Yeah.
sharper and
Yeah.
ask it,
Yeah.
etc. So that's one core thing. And then keep using it to sharpen your language. This is I realize is a game changer in AI, right? Even 6 months, 1 year back, I would tell people that, hey, you have to write crisper and shorter. But now you write 300 words and ask it, hey, make this shorter, make it 100 words. It'll do it
Yeah.
without losing the meaning. But that's
Absolutely.
because the original thinking is yours, right? So I
Hmm.
would say, yeah, so thinking yours, writing sharpening is okay with AI.
Absolutely.
Visuals
Absolutely.
also, I think AI can do a lot
Correct.
of help. If you can also tell it, I like a picture or I'd like a visual with these elements, that makes it even better.
Correct.
And the last part is delivery. There, I feel again your authenticity and this should come, but you can do some use cases where you say it out aloud and you record it, and then you ask AI for inputs and comments, right? And it might tell
Fascinating.
you, hey, pause better
Fascinating.
here, you're going too fast here, and so on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Fascinating.
think throughout the process it can help, but you should hold the reins in your hand.
Fantastic. And now, with one perspective of AI and technology, let me take you back into mythology and traditional storytelling. How should we use mythology or traditional storytelling or our scriptures to be able to uh, tell better stories in the business world today?
Oh man. So yeah, and this is, I think, one thing that we probably don't give as much credit to our culture, right? That many times we feel, no, Indians are very shy and we are not born natural storytellers. There is, in the West, especially younger people are taught show and tell, and they're a little more confident and they are happier to talk in meetings. But I feel, you know what, we've got, many thousands of years of history and culture of storytelling, right? So
Correct.
storytelling is
And
very
the
much in our blood, it's in our DNA.
longest poem in the world is Indian.
All of those, right? And so we've been using stories to engage, to educate, to entertain for
Correct.
thousands of years, so it's all
Mm,
there.
mm,
Lots of techniques of storytelling you'll find in all of these. You'll find techniques of clarity, you'll find techniques of engagement, of making
mm,
people care. So I'm this might not be a bad idea to share, Ashutosh, that I'm writing a book on storytelling techniques, um which is due to come later this year,
Oh,
sometime in
congratulations.
September.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so in that, I have, looked at multiple storytelling techniques. For example, analogies is a
Mm,
storytelling technique. And our literature, our ancient literature, mythology are rich in beautiful examples of analogy, right?
absolutely.
Including from the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm,
So I've shared some of those examples. Then there are some examples on continuity. How do you make sure that you continue right from paragraph A to paragraph B, slide one to slide two? So there's a lovely example from Tamil poetry called Antadi.
mhm,
So it's from the Sanskrit word anta and adi, right? The end and the beginning. So basically, how it works is that there are multiple stanzas. The last word, pretty much, of every stanza becomes the first word of the next stanza.
mm,
And the most famous example of that Antadi style of poetry is
mm,
called Abhirami Antadi,
mhm,
written by a Tamil poet many decades back, many centuries back. So that is one more example.
mm.
Continuity, analogies. But the one, one of my favorite examples of ancient, not very ancient, but medieval Indian storytelling is from Udaipur, or around close to Udaipur. It's a technique called as Kawad Katha. Have you heard of it?
I've heard the term, but I've not heard any of the kathas.
So it's interesting. It's not so much speaking; it's more showing. So
Hmm.
it's basically like a um, uh, think of it like a cuckoo clock, somewhere around
Yeah.
this size, and it is basically made of wood, and it opens up, step by step.
Hmm.
And with each opening up of the hinges of the doors, more panels are revealed, right? So
Hmm.
each door or each part of the wooden panel will have like maybe two. So maybe one shows the beginning part of the story, then the next panel. It's like a comic strip. It's a comic
Hmm.
book,
Hmm.
but made on a wooden, alarm clock kind of a thing. So it looks beautiful. And so that I share as a storytelling technique that control the release of information and
Hmm.
use visuals to show it like, in a comic strip. We can use that in slides, and that is something that it is. So a lot of these techniques have been used by our ancestors for millennia,
Hmm.
if not centuries, right? So
Correct.
it's great to learn from all of them.
Absolutely. Very well said. Ravi, we have time for two more questions for you. Um, my next question is that how can storytelling skills be effectively adapted for virtual or hybrid communication environments? Because that's how work today seems to be evolving into. And there's no more what I used to remember walking to the coffee machine and sitting and chatting with someone or strolling around on the floor and going and sitting with someone. All that has changed with so many different ways of working. I'd love to get your perspective on how can storytelling skills be adapted for new work environments.
It's a tricky one. And, I've kind of also tried to struggle with this when I'm teaching online, right? And there is, no point in saying that, we can be equal to the in person. You cannot, beat that. But be that as it may, this is better than not meeting at all, right?
Yeah.
And so it gives you a lot of ways. And apart from the fact that, of course, it doesn't give you the same thing as in person, but there are a lot of advantages in virtual that you probably don't get in person. So, for example, if I want to do eye contact when I'm talking to, let's say, five, six, seven people, in person, I have to like physically look at each person, right? In virtual, all I have to do is to look at the camera.
Correct.
Minor thing. So I always tell audiences that please keep your this open, the video on, and do not, it's okay, clean up your room or whatever, but keep the video on, because that's the basic minimum that you can do when you're virtually. If you're just going to keep your video off, you're telling everybody else, okay, you keep your videos off, they're not going to pay attention. Here at least you're telling them something, right? So that's
Mm,
one. And try and engage as much as you can, right?
mm,
So in person, you get to see people's body language, their cues, so you know that, hey, somebody does this, they are, maybe not paying attention, or they
mm.
didn't agree with you. So you can stop. You probably can't do that in a virtual setup. So
Yeah.
whenever you're presenting something, whenever you're teaching something, always keep taking
Mm,
stops and then asking people that, hey, is it all clear? Do we need
mm,
something? And ask questions.
mm,
So one of the techniques of storytelling is, if you've got something very surprising to share,
mm,
don't share it as a data point.
mm,
Ask it as a question.
mm,
And so, if you ask us a question, I might be like doing something else. Acha, this guy's asking a question. Okay, let me respond to it, right?
mm.
So I'm forced to engage at least,
Yeah.
right? So I'm or
Yeah.
encouraged to engage.
Mm.
So those are some two, three things that you can do in a virtual environment to at least try and make it a little more
Absolutely.
engaging than normal.
Absolutely. Well said. Great response. And my last question for you, Ravi. What is the single most important storytelling tip that you would give to our viewers and listeners who want to make some kind of a transformative impact?
Ooh, single most is very, very, very
Or give,
difficult
give a few
because
tips, okay?
it's like choosing between so many children. But yeah, I think the one technique that has probably helped me the most. I told you about these four ladders, right? The four
Mm,
steps of the ladder. There's clarity, there is engagement, there is making them care, making them trust. I would actually go with one thing on clarity, because I feel that many people do struggle there. So the single
mm,
most important one is a framework that I call the 139 story spine.
mm.
I'll just explain the framework and I'll tell you what
Yeah.
it entails, right? So the framework basically says that whenever you've got a crucial presentation or a talk, or even a response to a important email, etc.,
Mm,
how do you think about it? Think about it in this way, that try and write a one page summary of
mm,
your response, presentation, talk, proposal, etc., that has split your entire response into three parts. Part
mm,
one is a one sentence summary, right?
mm.
In one sentence you're covering everything that you want to say.
Yeah.
It's not an easy one, but you should have that. It's like an elevator pitch. Part two is you break that one into three parts, and then three will have a little more detail
Mm,
than just the one. And part three is that those three further get into three parts each. So that makes it nine.
mm,
So the 139 story spine is your entire story on one page.
mm,
You could call it the exact summary, the narrative summary, or whatever, right? If you take, if you've got, let's say, a 2 days, 3 days, or whatever time you've got, if you take 10-20% of your time
mm,
to write this down, preferably on paper or on a Word document. You can also get it vetted by AI, but write it down first yourself. Then you get a lot of clarity. Two, you can also get this reviewed by some of your seniors, stakeholders, bosses, etc. Say, am I missing something? Is the flow right, etc. And then the rest of your story can become much easier. The rest of your
mm,
slides or whatever, the
mm.
visuals can become much
Correct.
easier, because now you're very, very clear what
Correct.
needs to be done. So
Correct.
yeah, if there's only one technique, then I would say this is the most powerful one.
Fascinating. Fascinating. The 139 technique, everything that you've got on one page. But on that note, Ravi, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. Sometimes I wish I was born in a different environment, not in 1956, where I used to love storytelling, but those careers were not options available to me till after I stopped working. And now I love storytelling. Thank you for speaking to me about uh, the four key elements that you spoke about, which was align, build, choose, and deliver. Very powerful ABCD. Thank you for talking to me about the narrative driven storytelling approach, about the innate skills that people have to be able to tell a good story. You also brought in some very fascinating perspectives on both AI use to tell stories and how we can draw upon the very, very rich mythology or scriptures that we have in our country. And finally, thank you so much for the 139 tip. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Huge pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.